Can you hear me? Hi. This is early, isn't it? I've made this mix, mix that you can hear in the background. I made this myself. Not the music, of course, but I found some music for us to listen to while we enjoyed our spooky night in the library, Paradoxica. Today we are on the atrium. We have been here before, except below. We have been below the atrium before. Do you remember when? Astute viewers will know that we went below the atrium to go to the tidal vortex. But today we are above it. We stand above today. And today also is our, just a chill, fun day where we can, read some scary stories. And I can take care of some administration things. I hope you don't mind. Just little things like library stuff, checking in books, checking out books, just a regular fare. The stream seems quiet to me. Can you hear the music? Is everyone else hearing everything okay? My audio levels are the same. Let me move this over just a touch. So this way it's a little bit more balanced, I guess. I'm moving your head over a little bit, so. Also, hi YouTube, I see you over there. I see you little devils over there. I hope you all are doing well. Because this is an ASMR stream, the reactions and rewards are going to be slightly hushed for today, so this way you can hear my voice a little clearer, okay? Twitch and my headphones are as high as they go, but it's still so quiet. Nothing has changed on your end. It's got to be me. Oh no. Well, let me see what I can do. Okay. Let me put a slight gain filter on this and we'll see. Just give me 1 second, okay? Let's do like 3 more than usual. Is that a little better? Can you hear me clearer? Would you like me to bring you a little closer? Here. You are quite heavy today. Do you know that? Quite heavy. Very heavy today. Quite heavy. Very, very heavy today. But that is okay. Okay. I will put you over here. Either way, I hope your stuff, I guess, works itself out. I'm not sure, but oh boy. Let me do some, we almost forgot, didn't we? Did we forget what we were meant to do today? Did you forget? I think I forgot too. Rituals are very important. So, of course, we have our own, do we not? Don't worry, I'll remind you. Every time we have a ritual night, we have to light an incense. So, let's light our incense together. Library is magic, and magic is full of intention. So in order to make sure that our library is kept safe, we need to make sure to follow the rules of the ritual. You're ready. Oh. Let's go ahead and light this. So this way, we can have a successful day at the library. Paradoxica. There we are. Well, I have tons of papers in front of me. So I hope you all are ready for some stories. Scary. Maybe a little funny. Maybe some old ones that you've heard before. Maybe some new ones that are just as terrifying. If you don't know who I am, my name is Grimoire Index. I am a librarian vampire VTuber. Perhaps, maybe, in the service of an elder god. jury's out on that one. I am the caretaker, custodian, and delight at the library, Paradoxica, and I am pleased to meet your acquaintance. But yeah, today we're going to be chilling and reading scary stories. Tuck in, everybody. Where is our first creepy tale? Sorry about that. I knocked the lighter over. Okay. Just a moment. There we go. I know you guys love a good Are you looking forward to the story I have in my hands? I hope you are. It's a doozy. Because I'm of the virtual world, let's go ahead and do this one. Are you prepared? John Woodford, in his first moments of returning consciousness, was not aware that he was lying in his coffin. He only had a dull knowledge that he lay in utter darkness, and that there was a close, heavy quality in the air he breathed. He felt very weak, and only had a dim curiosity as to where he was and how he had come there. He knew that he was not lying in his bedroom at home, for the darkness there was never so complete as this. Home? That memory brought others to John Woodford's dulled brain as he recalled his wife now, and his son. He remembered, too, that he had been ill at home, very ill, and that was all he could remember. What was this place to which he had been brought? Just a moment. Why was the darkness so complete and the silence so unbroken? Why was there no one near him? He was a sick man, and they should have given him better care than this. He lay with a dull irritation at this treatment growing in his mind. Then he became aware that breathing was beginning to hurt his lungs, that the air seemed warm and foul. Why did not someone open a window? His irritation grew to such a point that spurred his muscles into action. He put right out his hand to reach for a bell or a light button. His hand moved slowly, only a few inches to the side, but then was stopped by an unyielding barrier. His fingers feebly examined it. It seemed a solid wall of wood or metal faceting with smooth satin. It extended all along his right side, and when he weakly moved his other arm, he found a similar wall on that side, too. His irritation gave way to mystification. Why in the world had they put him A sick man in this narrow place. Why? His shoulders rubbed against either side. He would soon know the reason for it, he told himself. He raised up to give utterance to a call that would bring those in attendance on him. To his utter amazement, his head bumped against a similar silk-lined wall directly above his face. He raised his arms in the darkness and discovered with growing astonishment that this wall or ceiling extended above him from head to foot, like those on either side. He lay in a similar silk-padded surface. Why in the name of all that was holy had they put him in a silk-lined box like this? Woodford's brain was puzzling this when a minor irritation made itself felt. His collar was hurting him. It was a high, stiff collar, and it was pressing into the flesh of his neck. But this again was mystery, that he should be wearing a stiff collar. Why had they dressed a sick man in formal clothes and put him in this box? Suddenly, John Woodford shrieked, and the echoes of his scream reverberated all around his ears like hideous demonic laughter. Suddenly, he knew the answer to it all. He was not a sick man anymore at all. He was a dead man, or at least what they had thought him dead, and put him into this coffin and closed it down. He was buried alive. The fears of his lifetime had come true. His secret, dark forebodings were hideously realized. From earliest childhood he had feared this very horror, for he had known himself to be... He had known himself cataleptic sleeps hardly to be distinguished from deaths. He had had nightmares of premature burial even after the proneness to cataleptic condition seems to have left him. His fears had clung to him. He had never told his wife or son of these fears, but they had persisted. They had inspired him to exact a promise that he would not be embalmed when buried, would be interred within his private vault instead of the earth. He had thought in that case that he were not really dead, but these provisions may save his life. But now he realized that they only laid him open to the horrifying fate that he had dreaded. He knew with terrible certainty that he lay now in his coffin in the stone vault in the quiet cemetery. His screams cannot be heard outside the vault, probably not even outside the coffin. But as long as he had laid in cataleptic sleep, he had not breathed. But now that he was awake and breathing, the air in the coffin was rapidly being exhausted, and he was doomed to perish of suffocation. Let me check on you guys. John Woodford temporarily went mad. He screamed with fear-choked throat as he shrieked and clawed with hands and feet at the unyielding satin-covered surfaces all around and above him. He beat upwards as best as he could upon the coffin's lid with clenched fists. But the heavy fastenings held firm. He yelled until his throat was too swollen to give utterance to sound. He clawed at the top until he broke his nails against the metal beneath the silk padding. He raised his head and beat against the top of it until he fell back half-stunned. exhausted for moments, unable to make any further efforts, his brain in march, a hideous pageant of horrors. The air seemed much closer and hotter now, and seemed to burn his lungs with each breath he inhaled. With sudden return of his frenzy, he shrieked and shrieked again. This was not to. He was in a horrible situation, but he must do what the best he could, not to give way to the horror. He had not many minutes left, and he must use them in the most rational way possible to try and escape his terrible prison. Let me back this up a little bit more. This is where I can rest my book on my desk. With this resolution, a little calm came to him, and he began to test his powers of movement. He clenched his fists again and hammered upward, but this did no good. His arms were jammed so closely against his body by the coffin's narrowness that he could not strike a strong blow, nor had he the leverage to push strongly upwards. What about his feet? Feverishly he tried them, but found his kicks upward to be even less powerful. He thought of hunching up his knees and thus bursting up the lid, but found that he could not raise his knees high enough, and that when he pressed upwards with them against the lid, his feet simply slid away on the smooth silk of the coffin bottom. Now the breaths he drew seared his lungs, and nostrils and brain seemed on fire. He knew his strength was waning, and that before long he would lose consciousness. He must do whatever he could swiftly. He felt the soft silk about him, and the dreading irony of it come home to him. He had been placed so lovingly in this death trap. He tried to turn on his side, for he thought that now he might use his shoulders to heave against the lid, but turning was not easy in that cramped coffin, and it had to be accomplished by a myriad of little hitching movements, an infinitely slow and painful process. John Woodford hitched and squirmed desperately until he lay on his left side. He found that his right shoulder touched the lid above. He braced his left shoulder on the coffin bottom and heaved upward with all his strength. There was no result. The lid seemed as immovable as ever. He heaved again, despair fast feeling in his heart. He knew that soon he would give way to shriek and claw. There was already a ringing in his ears. He had not many minutes left. With the utter frenzy of despair, he heaved upwards again with his shoulder. This time there was a grating sound of something above. The sound was like the wild pearl of 1,000 bells of hope to John Woodford's ears. He heaved quickly up again and again at the lid, paying no attention to the bruising of his shoulder. He pressed upwards with every ounce of his strength. Then there was another grating sound, and then a snap of metal fastenings breaking, and as he shoved upward with one convulsive effort, the heavy metal lid swung open and over, and struck the stone wall with a deep clang. A flood of cold air struck him. He struggled up over the coffin's side, dropped a few feet to a stone floor, and lay in a huddled mass. It was minutes before he had mastered himself, and summoned enough strength to stand. He stood inside a little vault that held no coffin but his own. Its interior was darkness, save for a dim shaft of starlight that came through a tiny window high above in one wall. John Woodford stumbled to the vault's heavy iron doors and fumbled at the lock. He had an uncontrollable horror of this place that had almost been the scene of his perishing. The coffin there on the shelf, with its lid leaning against the stone wall, seeming gaping for him within its dark, cadaverous mouth. He worked frantically at the lock. What if he were unable to escape from the vault? But the heavy lock was easily manipulated on the inside, he found. He managed to turn its tumbler and shoot its bar, and then the iron doors swung open. John Woodford stepped eagerly out into the night. He stopped on the vault's threshold, closing the doors behind him, and then looking forth with an inexpressible emotions. The cemetery lay in the starlight before him as dim as a dim, ghostly city of looming monuments and little vaults. Little sheets of ice glinted here and there in dim light, and the air was biting in his cold. Outside the cemetery's low walls blinked the lights of the surrounding city. Woodford eagerly started across the cemetery, unheeding of the cold. Somewhere across the lights of the city was his home, his wife, and somewhere his son, thinking him dead, mourning him. How glad would they be when he came back to them, alive? His heart expanded as he pictured their amazement and their joy at his return. He had come to the low stone wall of the cemetery and clambered quickly over it. It was apparent, after midnight, for the cars and pedestrians in sight in this suburban sector were few. Woodford hurried along the street. He passed people who looked at him in surprise, and only after some time did he realize the oddness of his appearance. A middle-aged man clad in a formal suit, lacking hard hat and overcoat, was an odd person to meet on a suburban street on a winter midnight. But he paid small attention to their stares. He did turn up the collar of his frock coat to keep out the cold, but he hardly felt the rigid air in the emotions that filled him. He wanted to get back to Helen, to witness her stupefaction and dawning joy when she saw him returned from the dead, living. A streetcar came clanging along, and John Woodford stepped quickly out to board it, but was almost quickly stepped back. He had mechanically thrust his hand into his pocket and found it quite empty. That was to be expected, of course. They didn't put any money in a dead man's clothes. No matter. He would soon be there on foot. As he reached the section in which his home was located, he glanced in a store window. Oh, thank you for the redeem. Oh, there's a raid. Welcome in, raiders. I didn't even see. Welcome in, welcome in. Oh my goodness. How was your stream? Let me quickly interrupt the story because I want to be polite. Everyone, please follow Cal. Thank you so much for coming in. Hello, raiders. Ah, the Saints, I see. If you are new around here, my name is Grimoire Index. I tell scary stories, if you couldn't tell. I like to delight. I also like to scare. If you like those things, and, you know, a little spice, then you are welcome to stay. What type of ASMR were you doing today? Were you doing lots of tappy taps? I'll take this moment to have a nice little sip of my beverage. Just the general triggers. Blah, blah, blah. Ironically, I'll tell you a secret. I'm actually very bad at general triggers. I'm so bad at I'm actually quite bad at it. So maybe I'll stop by your stream one day so I can learn something. Just some tappies, some experimenting. Okay. Looks like we'll do a little bit more talking soon, but we have about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Excuse me. We have about 4 minutes and 30 seconds before the ad break appears. If you wish to skip it entirely, then, you know, you become a Ghoul Ghoster Cast. You get a special role in Discord, and you get to help me pick my next ASMR. He also makes goodnight kisses triggers. Delulu Salulu. Yeah, I like it. You know what? I'm always about the Delulu. Delulu is the ultimate Salulu. I thought about doing little kisses and stuff. Thank you for the follow. By the way, I saw that. Okay, let's get back to reading. Now, where were we? Returned from the dead. As he hastened along the tree-bordered street on which his home was located, he almost laughed aloud as he thought how amazed some of his friends would be when they met him. They would think him a ghost or a walking corpse. Would perhaps he shrink in terror from him at first? But that thought brought another. He must not walk in on Helen too abruptly. The husband she had buried 10 days ago must not appear too suddenly, or the shock might easily kill her. He might contrive somehow to soften the shock of his appearance, must make sure that he did not startle her too much. With this resolve in mind, when he reached his big house, set well back from the street, Woodford turned aside through the grounds instead of approaching from the front entrance. He saw windows lighted in the library of the house, and he went towards them. He would see who was there. Oh, it looks like it's 2 minutes until ads. Oh, thank you for the biddies. Oh my goodness, wow. Ah, sound alerts are quite loud compared to you. Can't hear the background. Oh, I am so sorry. My darling dearests, let me, that would do it. Wow, thank you so much. That's 1,000 biddies. I don't think I've ever received that many before. Thank you. Oh, let me sit back down. Would you like something special? I was planning on doing like Dewey, are you trying to get us in trouble? Please behave yourself. Would you like me to say something in particular? Or would you like a trigger? I acquiesce. I was planning on setting something up where it was going to be a little bit more of a surprise, where if you guys did donate, you could have your name on my countenance, but I hadn't gotten that set up yet. But I'm working on it. For now, though, let me know your boon, and I will do my best to accommodate you. Total aside, the story is putting in mind a favorite dated album of mine. Is that a band or something? Open Casket. It's concept album from the perspective of a rotting corpse. Dark lo-fi jazz. You know me. You like jazz. I'm a ham. We're just going to chill out a little bit while ads play. You've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds. They're under ill-advised records. Well, Caesar, let me know what you would like your boon to be, if you want me to say something, or perhaps, I don't know, scribble your name on my countenance, or, you know, do a certain trigger for a little bit before we go back to reading. Dewey, if you don't mind, if you could link that concept album to me later, perhaps in the Discord, I would be most appreciative. I always love the idea of being buried alive. Partially because, you know, vampires feel best when they're in grave soil. But even when we're not in grave soil, the kind of bond and love a casket could bring. The story even mentions it. You are lovingly laid to rest, wrapped in satin, set in your best clothes, your Sunday best, and sent off to the afterlife. Your worldly possessions fall away from you as you sit in your box, forever embraced by the love of your family, or perhaps maybe their ire. I think it's romantic in a way. Are there double coffins? Do you think there's like double coffin where you can have more than one person in it? Also posting here for chatters. Oh yes, that is the YouTube link. So if you don't want to wait on the ads, you can just join the YouTube stream. It's fine. It's basically the same thing. Yes, there are. Oh, I think it would be beautiful. Welcome back, everybody. Let's continue reading, shall we? He silently climbed onto the terrace outside the library windows and approached the tall easements. He peered in. Through the silken curtains inside, he could clearly see the room's softly lit interior, cozy with the shelves of his books and the lamps and the fireplace. Helen, his wife, sat on a sofa with her back partly towards the window. Beside her sat a man that Woodford recognized as one of their close friends, Kurt Dawes. The sight of Dawes gave Woodford an idea. He would get Dawes outside in some way and have him break the news of his return to Helen. His heart was pounding at the sight of his wife. Then Curtis Dawes spoke, his words dimly audible to Woodford outside the window. "Happy, Helen?" His voice was acting. "So happy, dear," she answered, turning towards him. Out of the darkness, Woodford stared in perplexed wonder. How could she be happy when she thought her husband dead and buried? He heard Dawes speaking again. "It was a long time," the man was saying. "Those years I waited, Helen." She laid her hand tenderly on his. "I know, and you never said a word. I respected your loyalty to John." She looked into the fire musingly. "John was a good husband. Kurt, he really loved me, and I never let him guess that I didn't love him, that it was you, his friend, I loved, but when he died I could not feel grief. I felt regret for his sake, of course, but underneath it was the consciousness that at last you and I were free to love each other." Dahl's arm went around her shoulder. "Darling, you don't regret that I talked you into marrying me right away? You don't care that people may be talking about us?" "I don't care for anything but you," she told him. "John was dead. Young Jack had his own home and wife, and there was no reason in the world why we should not marry. I'm glad that we did." In the darkness outside the window, a stunned and dazed John Woodford saw her lift an illuminated face towards the man. "I am proud to be your wife at last, dear. No matter what any may say about us," he heard. Woodford drew back slowly from the window. He paused in the darkness under the trees, his mind shaken, torn. So this was the homecoming from the tomb. This was the joy he had anticipated in Helen when he arrived. It couldn't be the truth. His ears had deceived him. Helen would not be the wife of Kurt Dawes, but yet part of his mind told him remorselessly that it was true. He'd always sensed that Helen's feeling for him was not as strong as his for her, but that he had loved Dawes. But she had loved Dawes more than he had ever dreamed. Yet now he remembered Dawes' frequent visits, the odd silence between him and Helen. He remembered 1,000 trifles that spoke of the love which these two had cherished for each other. What was he, John Woodford, to do? Walk in upon them and tell them that they had been premature in counting him dead, that he had come back to claim his position in life, and his wife again. He couldn't do it. If Helen, during those years, had wavered in the least in her loyalty to him, she would have had less computation. But in the face of all those years of silent, uncomplaining life with him, he couldn't now reappear to her and blast her newfound happiness and blacken her name. Woodford laughed a little, bitterly. He was then to be an Enoch, Arden from the tomb, a strange foal, surely yet it was the only one open to him. What was he to do? He couldn't let Ellen know that he was alive, couldn't return to the home that he had been his. And yet he must go somewhere. Where? With a sudden leap of heart, he thought of Lack, his son. He could at least go to Jack, let his son know that he was living. Jack at least would be overjoyed to see him, and would keep the fact of his return secret from his mother. John Woodford thought that with the rekindling of his little numbed feelings, started back through the trees and towards the street where he had approached the house but a minute before with eager steps. He stole away now like a thief, fearful for being observed. He reached the street and started across the blocks towards the cottage of his son. Few were abroad, for the cold seemed increasing, and it was well past midnight. Woodford mechanically rubbed his stiffened hands as he hurried along. He came to his son's little neat white cottage and felt relief as he saw lights from its lower windows as well. He feared that no one would be up. He crossed the frozen lawn to the lighted windows, intent on seeing if Jack were there and if he were alone. He peered in, and as he had done in his own home, Jack was sitting at a little desk, and his young wife was perched at the arm of his chair and was listening as he explained something to her from a sheet of writing on the desk. John Woodford, pressing his face against the cold window pane, could hear Jack's words. "You see, Dorothy, we can just make it by adding our savings to Dad's insurance money," Jack was saying. "Oh, Jack," cried Dorothy, "and it is what you've wanted for so long, a little business of your own." Jack nodded. "It wouldn't be much to start with, but I'll make it grow. This is the chance I've been hoping for, and I'll make the most of it." "Of course," he said, his face sobering a little. "It's too bad about Dad going like that. But seeing that he did die, the insurance money solves our problems of getting started. Now you just take the overhead," he said, and began unreeling a string of figures to the intent Dorothy. John Woodford slowly drew back from the window. He felt more dazed and bewildered than ever before. He had forgotten the insurance he had carried, which he had intended to give Jack his start. But of course, he had saw now that it had been paid over when he was believed dead. But he was not dead, but living. But if he let Jack know that, it meant the end of his son's long-desired opportunity. Jack would have to return the insurance money to the company, wrecking his dreams of choice. How could he let him know then? John Woodford, had already decided that he must remain dead to his wife, and therefore the world. He might as well remain dead to his son also. It was for the best. John Woodford melted away from the cottage into the darkness. When he reached the street, he stood in an indecision. A freezing wind began to blow, and he felt very cold without an overcoat. Mechanically, he turned his coat collar closer around his neck. He tried to think of what he must do neither Helen nor Jack must know that he was living, and that meant no one in the city must know. He must get out of town to some other place, take up a life on some other name. He would need help, money to do that. Where was he to get them, barred as he was from calling on his wife or son, to whom he would turn to for help without letting his return become generally known? Howard Norse. The name came at once to Woodford's lips. Norse had been his employer, head of the firm where Woodford had held a position for many years. Woodford had been one of his oldest employees. Howard Norse would help him get a position elsewhere, and would keep his reappearance secret. He knew where Norse's residence was, several miles out in the country, but he couldn't walk that far, for he had no taxi or trolley fare. He would have to telephone to Norse. Woodford walked back towards the city's central section, head bent against the piercing cold wind. He succeeded in finding an all-night lunchroom, whose proprietor allowed him to use the telephone. With cold, stiffened fingers, he dialed Norse's number. Howard Norse's sleepy voice came through on the wire. "Mr. Norse, this is Woodford, John Woodford," he said quickly. There was an incredulous explanation from Howard Norse. "You're crazy. John Woodford's been dead and buried for a couple of weeks." "No, I tell you. It's John Woodford," insisted Woodford. "I am not dead at all. I am living as you are. If you will come into town for me, and you will see for yourself." "I am not likely to drive for town at 2 a.m. to look upon a maniac," Norse replied acidically. "Whatever your game is, you're wasting your time on me." "But you have to help me," Woodford cried. "I have no money. I have to have money and a chance to get up city without hardly anyone knowing. I gave your firm my services for years, and now you have to give me help." "Listen to me, whoever you are," snapped Norse over the wire. "I was bothered enough by John Woodford when he was living. He was so inefficient we would have kicked him out long ago if we hadn't been so sorry for him. But now that he is dead, you needn't think you could bother me in his name. Good night." The receiver clicked in John Woodford's unbelieving ear. He stared at the instrument. So this is what they had really thought of him at the firm, where he had always thought of himself one of the most highly valued employees. But there was someone whom he could call for help, someone he could convince that John Woodford was still living, someone who would be glad to think that he might be living. What about Willis Gran? Gran had been his closest friend next to Curtis Dawes. He had lent money more than once to Woodford in the past, and certainly should be willing to do so now. Hastily, Woodford called Gran's number. This time he was more careful in his approach, and when he heard the other's voice. "Willis, I have to tell you something that may sound incredible, but you've got to believe you hear," he said. "Who is this? And what in the world are you talking about?" demanded Gran's startled voice. "Willis, this is John Woodford. Do you hear? John Woodford. Everyone thinks that I am dead, but I am not, and I've got to see you." "What?" cried the other voice over the telephone. "Why, you must be drunk. I saw Woodford laying in his coffin myself. I know that he is dead. I tell you it is not so. I am not dead." Woodford almost screaming. "I've got to get some money, though, to get away from here. You must lend it to me. You always lent it to me before, and I need it. Now, worse than ever, I have to get away." "So that's it," Willis Gran said. "Because I used to help Woodford out, you think you can get money from me by calling me up and pretending that you're he? Why, Woodford himself was the biggest pest in the world with his constant borrowing. I almost felt relieved when he died, and now you try to make me believe that he's come back from the dead only to pester me again? But he never died. I'm John, really. Woodford protested vainly. Sorry, old top, returned Crane's mocking voice. Next time, pick a living person to impersonate, not a dead one. He hung up. John Woodford slowly replaced the receiver and made his way out to the street. The wind was blowing harder, and now was bringing with it clouds of fine snow that stung against his face like sand. He shivered, and as he stumbled along the streets of dark stops, his body freezing as his mind was frozen. There was no one from whom he could get help, he saw. His paramount necessity was still to get out of the city, and he must do that. And to do that, he must rely on himself. The icy blasts of snow wind penetrated through his thin coat. His hands were shaking from the cold. A sign caught Woodford's eye, the illuminated beacon of a relief lodging house. At once he made his way towards it. He could at least sleep there tonight and get started from the city in the morning. The shabby men dozing inside chairs looked queerly at him as he entered. So did the young clerk, who he had made his way. I'd like to stay here for tonight, he said to the clerk. The clerk started. Are you kidding me? Woodford shook his head. No. I'm penniless and it's cold outside. I've got to stay somewhere. Listen, fellow, no one with duds like yours is that hard up. Scram before I call a cop. Woodford looked down at his clothes, his frock coat and stiff white shirt, gleaming patent leather shoes, and understood. He said desperately to the clerk, But these clothes don't mean anything. I tell you, I haven't a penny. Will you beat it before I have you thrown out of here? The clerk demanded. Woodford backed towards the door. He went outside again to the cold. The wind had increased, and more snow was falling. The front of Woodford's coat was soon covered with it as he pushed along. It came to him as a queer joke that the splendor of his funeral clothes should keep him from getting help now. He couldn't even beg a passerby for a dime. Who would give to a panhandler in formal clothes? Woodford felt his body quivering and teeth clattering from sheer cold. If he could only get out of this blessed icy wind. His eyes sought desperately along the street for a hallway where he might shelter himself. He found a deep doorway and crouched inside, out of the wind and driving snow. But hardly he had done so when a heavy step paused in front of him, and a nightstick rapped his feet smartly. An authoritative voice told him to get up and go home. Woodford did not try to explain to the policeman that he was not a drunken citizen fallen by the way. He got wearily to his feet and moved along the street, unable to move more a few feet ahead for the whirl of the snow. The snow of which he was walking penetrated to the thin shoes he wore, and his feet were soon even colder than the rest of his body. He walked with slow, dragging steps, head bent against the storm of white. Let me move you guys over here so I can keep an eye on you. He was dully aware that the dark shops beside him had given way to a low stone wall. With a sudden start, he recognized it as the wall of the cemetery, which he had left but hours before, the cemetery containing the vault from which he had escaped. The vault! Why hadn't he thought of it before? He asked himself. The vault would be a shelter from the freezing wind and snow. He could stay there for a night without anyone objecting. paused, feeling for a moment a little renewal from his former tremors. Did he dare go back into that place from which he had struggled to escape? Then an extra strong blast of icy air struck him, and decided that the vault would be shelter, and that was what his frozen body craved more than anything else. Swiftly he climbed over the stone wall and made his way to the cemetery's whitened monuments and vaults towards one from which he had escaped. The driving snow covered his tracks almost as he made them, as he trudged towards the vault. He reached it and tried its iron doors anxiously. Suppose he had locked them when he had left, but to his relief, they swung open, and he entered and shut them. It was dark inside, but he was out of the wind and snow now, and his body numbed to feel a little relief. Woodford sat in the corner of the vault. It was shelter for the night at least. It seemed rather ironic that he had come back here for shelter, but it was something to be thankful for, that he had even had this. In the morning, when the storm was over, he could leave without anyone seeing and get out of the city. He sat listening to the wind and snow shriek outside. The stone floor of the vault was very cold, so cold that he felt his limbs stiffening and cramping. Finally he stood up unsteadily and paced to and fro in the vault, chafing his arms and hands. If only he had a blanket or even a heavy coat to lie upon, he'd freeze there upon the stone floor. And then, as he turned into his pacing, he bumped into a coffin on the shelf, and a new idea was born in his mind. Why, the coffin! The interior of it was lined with deep silk and satin padding. It would be warm in the coffin. He could sleep in it for better than one. He can sleep in it for better than on the stone floor. But did he dare re-enter it? Again Woodford felt faintly the former terrors he had experienced when he had awakened in it, but they meant nothing, he told himself. He wouldn't be fastened in this time, and his frozen flesh yearned for the warmth of the coffin's lining. Carefully he climbed up and lowered himself into the coffin and stretched out. The silk padding, and he sank into a grateful warmth. He lowered his head upon the soft little pillow with a sigh of relief. This was better. He experienced an almost luxury comfort now. But after he had lain a while, he felt that the top of his body was cold, where the cold air had come in from the coffin's top, and that cold air entering kept him from being completely warm. If the lid above him were just closed, just to keep out the cold air. He reached up and got the edge of the heavy metal lid, and then let it down upon himself. He was completely in the dark now, inside the closed coffin lid, but he was warm too, for the lid kept out the cold, and he was getting warmer all the time, as his body warmed up the interior. Yes, for it was more comfortable with the lid closed, and even warmth now pervaded his whole being, and the air outside the coffin was still getting warmer and thicker. He felt a little drowsy now, as he breathed that warm air, felt luxuriously sleepy, as he laid on the soft silk. It was getting harder to breathe somehow as the air became thicker. He ought to really raise the coffin lid and let in some fresh air. But it was so warm now, and the air outside was so cold. And he was much more sleepy. Something dim and receding in his fading consciousness told him that he was on the way to suffocation. But what if he was? was a sleepy thought. He was better off in here than back out in the world outside. He had been a fool to ever fight so hard to get back out into his warm, comfortable coffin, to get back into the outside world. No, it was better like this. The darkness and the warmth and the sleep that advanced. No one would ever know that he had woken at all, and that he had been away from here at all. Everything would be just as before, just as before. And with that comforting assurance, John Woodford was swept away farther and farther down the dark stream of unconsciousness, from which this time there would be no returning. And that was The Man Who Returned by Craig Groeschek. Did you like that story, everyone? No, don't do it. I really enjoyed that one. I'm glad. I thought it was a very good story, too. Oh, what is happening? Very good. Let me have a bit of, oh wow, just in time for ads. Look at me. I'm doing it. I'm on a roll today. I hope you all are enjoying tonight's ambience. Not Monster Can ambience, you know. Monster Can ambience. The library is very, very quiet today. And while I have a lot to do after this, I know that tomorrow is St. Valentine's. I hope you will be spending it with your loved ones. I brought lots of chocolates and among other things. Maybe if I'm not too busy, there might be a video waiting for you on YouTube. So you can spend a little bit of your Valentine with Grimm. But don't spend all of it. Make sure to get your mother something nice, okay? Get her some flowers and a card. And her favorite wine. Get her favorite wine. No, okay, get yourself the wine then. Get yourself the wine and the flowers and the chocolates, okay? You could have a date for yourself, or you could have a friend's date. That's fun too. Gather your friends and closely related allies and have delicious flan for your Valentine's Day. I've got the wine, it's chocolate, and I have sugar-free pudding. See? That's goals. As for me, I have some flowers and chocolates for my Grim Mom and Grim Nana, so this way they can have their Valentine's Day. Would you like to hear a tale about something that happened one Valentine's Day in the library, Paradoxica? Well, let me tell you. I'm sending love to Grim Mom and Grim Nana. Oh, I will let them know. Looks like those ads are getting ready to occur. There was a young couple that came into the library, Paradoxica. Now, these two were go-getters. Business suits, hair. I bow to no ads. Hey, and that's good. Now, these, if you would like to join Andy in not bowing to ads, consider becoming a ghoul, ghast, or ghost. You get a special Discord role, and you get to let me know which ASMR you want me to perform first, and you get to see sneak peeks of my art whenever I remember to put them in the channel, but don't worry. And it's usually just a fun time in my Discord, I promise. Anyway, so this young couple comes in. They are wearing business suits. They are dressed very flashy. They come up to the library, walk up, and they say, "We want to commune with our patron." I look them over, I'm like, and I realize that these are glamoured humans. These are not humans at all. So I nod to them, and I point them towards the orb. Now, of course, I'm curious now, because your grim is nosy. I'm nosy as heck. So I go with them. To the orb. And I watch them go into the orb's circumference, and I follow, of course. And they essentially sit down in the center of the orb. So if you don't know the orb's layout, there are several tables. There are several tables for studying. There's an entire PC bank section with vending machines, and there's like a middle section where you can sit down and read books. Essentially, it's very comfortable. We get a lot of people who fall asleep there, but as long as you have a book with you and, you know, you're relatively human, you won't be hurt. I'm gonna keep telling the story while the ads are playing. But they had essentially went into the orb and sat into that kind of comfy area, which is in the center. And they looked upwards, and their patron was there. And she did not look pleased. She was mad. Like, she was clearly a demon from hell. So, clearly high tier. They looked similar to her, actually. They looked very similar to her, but her horns were pronounced, and they kind of sat on her head like regalia. Like, they were immense, and she was very tall. Now, your Grim is quite tall as well, but she was huge. Big lady. She essentially was a succubus demon, and she was frankly upset at her subordinates for essentially squandering Valentine's Day. So, according to the boss lady's words, she said that instead of bringing humans to their fold, they instead decided to have sex with each other. Which ultimately, yes, you know, there's some nice sexual energy that happens, but, you know, they're succubi, right? So they need to get substance from somewhere. And because they decided not to get any from humans. They had essentially wasted what was a very, they were very confused, but they got the spirit. So the boss lady's like, Valentine's Day is almost over. What are we going to do? And, the boss lady sees that I'm there listening. And they say, hey, there's a pliant librarian right there. And I said, no. No, we're not going to do that here. So, I suggested the best thing that I knew I could do. I said, there's a card shop down the road, right? There is a card and comic book shop down the road. You will find plenty of people that need a Valentine and that are looking for some kind of experience. Good luck. And I'd like to say that after a couple of days later, they came back, all bright and bushy-tailed, and they told me that they had meet and beat their quota for the year. And they gave me a little treat of their hauls. It was very nice. I got this. Where is it? I got a magic card. I got one of those. It's of Tails from Sonic. I have one of those. And I have a card pack of, what is this? Final Fantasy. I have a Final Fantasy card pack from their spoils. Very good. It's a very good time. While I don't really suggest using the orb to commune with your elder pact demon, it is possible to do that. Oh, Mori, welcome in. Welcome. Oh my goodness, Sonic Riders. I haven't played that game in years. The roses are invading. I'm being covered in roses. Thank you. Roses. Welcome in, Raiders. If you don't know me, my name is Grimoire Index, and I am a vampire librarian VTuber. We were taking a quick break to, discuss little, Valentine's Day, silliness that happens in the library Paradoxica before going on to the next story. If you need to raid and run, then feel free to know that your community is safe, but frightened with me. What were you doing in Sonic Riders? Tell me all about it. Hi. And for your cute roses, don't worry, I will keep them well watered. We have a garden in here too. Not to be dramatic, but I'm obsessed with you. I'm obsessed with me too. I'm kidding. I was gonna yap and play, but I decided to lock in and speed run the story mode. Yeah. I unironically love I think his name is Jet. I love that team. Like, I love that team of characters. The music was so cool. Sonic Riders was so fun. Absolutely love the vibe in here. The model is amazing. Thank you. I made it myself. Yes, Babylon Rose are so damn cool. Yes, they're so cool. Unironically, everyone, I am a secret stealth Sonic fan. Oh my god, really? That's amazing, dude. Yeah, it was a lot of work. A lot. Like, a lot of work. But, I'm happy to, you know, enjoy it, I guess. It feels good to finally have it working and doing its thing. There's also a couple of things I need to add as well. So, with that being said, though, I think it might be time for our next story. Step on me. Oh my god, who said that? Well, if you're looking for more of that kind of feeling, I do have some ASMRs on my YouTube channel that may be up to your liking. Or you can wait for the one that's coming out on Valentine's Day, because that one involves necklaces, if you understand. Necklaces and cookies and kidnapping. I'm trying. I'm gonna read out the tag list in a second. Let's go ahead and read our next story, shall we? Ooh. What is happening today? This one is a long one. Tuck in, everybody. Super glad to read it. Well, I am very happy to have you. Now let's begin. There it was. The Albrecht liberation of sound. As he timed it with his watch, Bassett likened it to the trump of an archangel. Walls of cities, he meditated, might as well fall down before such a vast and compelling summons. For the thousandth time, vainly, he tried to analyze the tone quality of that enormous pearl that dominated the land, far into the strongholds of the surrounding tribes. The mountain gorge, which was its source, rang to the rising tide of it until it brimmed over and flooded earth and sky and air. With the wantonness of a sick man's fancy, he likened it to a cry of some titan of elder world, vexed with misery or wrath. Higher and higher it rose, challenging, demanding, in such profound volumes that it seems intended for ears beyond the narrow confines of the solar system. There it was, too, its clamor of protest, that in that were no ears to hear and comprehend its utterance. Such the sick man's fancy. Still, he strove to analyze the sound, sonorous as thunder as it was, mellow as a golden bell, thin and sweet as a thrummed, taut cord of silver. No, it was none of these, nor a blend of these. There were no words nor semblances in his vocabulary and experience with which to describe the totality of that sound. Time passed. Minutes merged into quarters of hours, and quarters of hours into half hours, and still the sound persisted, ever changing in its initial vocal impulses, yet never receiving fresh impulses, fading, dimming, dying as enormously as it had sprung into being. It became a confusion of troubled mutterings and babblings and colossal whisperings. Slowly it withdrew, sob by sob, into whatever great bosom it had bursted, until it whimpered deadly whispers of wrath and equally seductive whispers of delight, striving to still be heard, to convey some cosmic secret with understanding of infinite importance and value. it dwindled to a ghost of sound. That minute that had lost its menace and promise, and had become a thing that pulsed on the sick man's consciousness for minutes after it had ceased. When he could hear it no longer, Bassett glanced at his watch. An hour had elapsed ere the archangel's trump had subsided into total nothingness. Was this then his dark tower? Bassett pondered, remembering his Browning and gazing at the skeleton-like and fever-wasted hands, and the fancy made him smile, of child rolling, bearing a slug horn to his lips, with an arm as feeble as he was. Was it months or years, he asked himself, as he had first heard that mysterious call on the beach of Ring Meow? To save himself he could not tell. The long sickness had been most long. In consciousness count of time he knew of months, many of them. But he had no way of estimating the long intervals of delirium and stupor. How fared Captain Baterman of the Blackbirder? Nori? He wondered, and had Captain Baterman's drunken mate died of delirium tremens yet? From which vain speculation Bassett turned idly to review all that occurred since that day on the beach of Ring Meow, when he had first heard the sound and plunged into the jungle after it. Sagawa had protested. He could see him yet, his queer little face. I'm gonna avoid that because I think that's like very his back burdened with specimen cases. In his hand, Bassett's butterfly net and naturalist shotgun as he quivered in Berche Dermer English. I'm going to say this is unintelligible and spare you all the reading. Bassett smiled sadly at the recollection. The little Handover boy had been frightened, but had proven faithful, following him without hesitation into the bush, into the quest after the source of the wonderful sound. No fired, hollowed-out tree trunk that throbbing war through the jungle's depths had been Bassett's conclusion. Erroneously had been his next conclusion, namely, that the source or cause could not be more distant than an hour's walk, and that he would easily be back by mid-afternoon to be picked up by the Nary's whaleboat. Sagawa had adjudged, and Sagawa had been right. Had he not had his head hacked off within the day? Bassett shuddered. Sagawa had been eaten as well by the bad people that stopped along the bush. He could see him as he had lost him, stripped of the shotgun and all the naturalist gear by his masters, laying in the narrow trail where he had been decapitated barely a moment before. Yes, a minute. The thing had happened. Within a minute, looking back, Bassett had seen him trudging patiently along his burdens. Then Bassett's own trouble came upon him. He looked cruelly at healed stumps of the first and second fingers of his left hand, and then rubbed them softly into the indentation to the back of his skull. Quick as he had been at the flash of the long-handled tomahawk, he had been quick enough to duck away, his head partially to deflect some of the stroke with his upflung hand. 2 fingers and a hastily scalp wound had been the price he had paid with his life. With one barrel of his 10-gauge shotgun, he had blown the life out of the bushman who had newly caught him. With the other barrel he had peppered the bushman, bending over Sagawa, and had the pleasure of knowing that the major portion of the charge had gone into the one who had left away with Sagawa's head. Everything had occurred in a flash. Only himself, the slain bushman, and what remained of Sagawa were in the narrow, wild pig run of a path. From the dark jungle on either side came no rustle of movement or sound of life, and he had suffered distinct and dreadful shock. For the first time in his life he had killed a human being, and he had known nausea as he contemplated the mess of his handiwork. He had then begun the chase. He retreated up the pig run before his hunters, who were between him and the beach. How many were there? He could not guess. There might have been 1 or 100, for aught he saw them. That some of them took to the trees and traveled along the jungle roof, he was certain, but at the most he'd never glimpsed more than the occasional flitting of shadows. No bowstrings twanged that he could hear, but every little while, whence discharged, he knew not, tiny arrows whispered past him in shock. They were bone-tipped and feather-shafted, and the feathers tore from the breasts of hummingbirds, iridescent like jewels. Once and now, after the long lapses of time, he chuckled gleefully at the recollection. He had detected a shadow above him that had come to an instant rest as he turned his gaze upward. He could make out nothing, but deciding to chance it, had fired at a heavy discharge a number 5 shot. Squalling like an infuriated cat, the shadow crashed down through the trees, ferns, and orchards and thudded upon the earth at his feet, still crawling at its rage and pain, and had sunk its human teeth into the ankle of his stout tramping boot. He, on the other hand, was not idle. With his free foot had done, reduced the squalling to silence. So ensured to savagery that Bassett had become, that he chuckled again with the glee of the recollection. And what a night followed! Small wonder did he accumulated such a virulence and variety of fevers, he thought, as he recalled that sleepless night of torment when the throb of his wounds was nothing compared to the myriad stings of the mosquitoes. There had been no escaping them, and he did not dare light a fire. They had literally pumped his body full of poison, so that the coming day his eyes were swollen almost shut, and he had stumbled blindly on, not caring much when his head should be hacked off and his carcass stuffed on the way back to Sagawa's, to the cooking fire. 24 hours had made a wreck of him, of his mind as well as body. He had scarcely retained his wits at all, so maddening was he by the tremendous inhalation of poison that he'd received. Several times he fired his shotgun with effect into the shadows that dogged him. Stinging day insects and gnats added to his torment, while his bloody wounds attracted hosts of loathsome flies that clung sluggishly to his flesh and had to be brushed off and crushed off. In that day, he heard again the wonderful sound, seeming more distant, but rising imperiously above the near war drums in the bush. Right there was when he had made his mistake, thinking that he had passed beyond that, and therefore it was between him and the beach of the Rigamiao. He had walked back towards it, when in reality he was penetrating deeper and deeper into the mysterious heart of the unexplored island. That night, crawling among the twisted roots of a banyan tree, he slept from exhaustion while the mosquitoes had their will of him. Followed days and nights were vague as nightmares in his memory. One clear vision he remembered was the sudden finding himself in the midst of a bush village, watching the old men and children fleeing into the jungle. All had fled but one. From close at hand and above him, as a whimpering as some sort of animal in pain, and terror had started him. And upon he had seen her, a girl or young woman rather, suspended by one arm in the cooking sun. Perhaps for days she had hung. Her swollen, protruding tongue spoke as much, still alive as she gazed at him with eyes of terror. Past help, he decided, as he noted the swelling of her legs, which had advertised that her joints had been crushed and great bones broken. He resolved to shoot her, and then the vision terminated. He could not remember whether he had not any more. He could not remember if he had or had not any more that he could remember how he chanced to be in that village, or how he succeeded in getting away from it. Many pictures unrelated came and went in Bassett's mind as he reviewed that period of his terrible wanderings. He remembered invading another village of 12 houses and driving all before him with his shotgun, save one old man too feeble to flee, who spat at him and whined and snarled as he dug open a ground oven, and from amidst the hot stone dragged forth the roasted pig that steamed its essence deliciously through its green-leafed wrappings. It was at this place a wantonness of savagery had appeased upon him. Having feasted, ready to depart, with a hind quarter of the pig in his hand, he deliberately fired the grass stack of a house with his burning glass. But seared deepest in Bassett's brain was the dark, noisome jungle. It actually stank with evil, and it was almost twilight. Rarely did a shaft of sunlight penetrate its matted roof for 100 feet overhead, and beneath that roof was an eerie aerial ooze of vegetation, a monster parasitic dripping with decadent life forms that rooted in death and lived on in death. And through all of this he drifted, ever pursued by flitting shadows of the anthropology, themselves as ghosts of evil that dared not face him in battle, but knew that sooner or late they would feed on him. Bassett remembered that at that time, in his lucid moments, that he had likened himself to a wounded bull, pursued by the plains coyotes, too cowardly to battle with him for the meat of him, yet certain of the inevitable end when they would be fully gorged. As the bull's horns and stomping foot kept off the coyotes, so his shotgun kept off of these Solomon Islanders, these twilight shades of bushmen of the island of Galakalno. Came the day of the grasslands. Abruptly, as if cloven by the sword of God, in the hand of God, the jungle terminated, the edge of it perpendicular and as black as the infamy of it, was 100 feet up and down, and beginning on the edge of it grew the grass, sweetly soft and tender pasture grass that would have delighted the eyes and beasts of any husbandman that had extended on and on for leagues and leagues of velvet verdure to the backbone of the great island and the towering mountain range that flung up by some ancient earth cataclysm, serrated and gold, but not yet erased by the erosive tropic rains. But the grass, he had crawled into it 12 yards, buried his face in it, smelt it, and broke down into a fit of involuntary weeping. while he wept, the wonderful sound had pealed forth, if by pearl. He had often thought since an adequate description could be given at the enunciation so fast of a sound, melting sweet. Sweet as it was, no sound ever was heard, vast as it was, so mighty a resonance that it might have preceded some form of brazen-throated monster, yet it called to him across that leagues-wide savannah. It was like a benediction to his long-suffering, pain-racked spirit. He remembered how he laid there in the grass, wet-cheeked but no longer sobbing, listening to the sound, and wondered if he had been able to hear it on the beach of Rigmiao. Some freak of air pressures and air currents, he reflected, had made it possible for the sound to carry so far. Such conditions may not happen again in 1,000 days, or 10,000 days. But the one day it had happened had been the day he landed from the Nori, several hours collecting. Especially, he had been in the quest of the famed jungle butterfly, afoot across from wing-tip to wing-tip. As velvet dusky of lacking color was the gloom of the roof, and such lottie arborist habits that resorted to only the jungle roof and could only be brought down by a dose of shot. It was the purpose that Sagawa had carried the 10-gauge shotgun. 2 days and nights he had spent crawling across that beltland. He had suffered much, but pursuit had ceased at the jungle's edge, and he would have died of thirst if not for a healing thunderstorm revived him that second day. And then came the balada. At first stage, when the savannah had yielded to the dense mountain jungle, he had collapsed to die. At first she had squealed with delight at the sight of his helplessness, and was beating his brain out with a stout forest branch. Perhaps it was his very utter helplessness that had appealed to her, and perhaps it was her human curiosity that made her refrain. At any rate, she had refrained, and he opened his eyes again at the impending blow, and saw her studying him intently. What especially struck her about him were his blue eyes and white skin. Coolly she squatted on her hams, spat on his arm with her fingers, and scrubbed away the dirt for days and nights of muck and jungle that had sullied. Oh, that's weird. We're skipping that. And everything about her had struck him especially, although there was nothing conventional about her at all. He laughed weakly at the recollection, for she had been as innocent of garb as Eve before the fig-leaf adventure, squat and lean at the same time, asymmetrically limbed, string-muscled, as if with lengths of... I need to get the details after this stream. Yeah, it's giving me... I'm like, like, my my ancestors are looking at me very closely while I read this. As with lengths of cordage, dirt-caked from infancy except for casual showers, she was an unbeautiful prototype as a woman, as he, with a scientist's eye, had ever gazed upon him. Her breadths advertised at one time her maturity and youth, and by nothing else her sex was advertised by one finery in which she was adorned, namely a pig's tail, thrust through a hole in her left earlobe. So lately the tail had been severed that its raw end still oozed blood and dried upon her shoulder, much like candle droppings. And we are going to skip the weird racist language. there. Not even the water. We are going to, oh wow. Yeah, we are going to skip the heck out of that. Not even the water she brought him in a forest leaf. And the ancient, half-putrid trunk of roast pig could redeem the slightly grotesque hideousness of her. When he had eaten weakly for a space, he closed his eyes in order not to see her, although again and again she poked them open to peer at the blue of them. And then had come the sound, nearer, much nearer. He knew it to be, and he knew equally well, despite the weary way he had come, that it was still many hours distant. The effect on her had been startling. She cringed at it, averted face moaning, chattering with fear, and after it had still been... Oh, looks like ads are getting ready to start. Okay. Oh. This is one of those... This isn't Lovecraftian, so I figured I was going to be... I mean, this is a cosmic horror story, but I did not... I was like, Old stories seem to, unfortunately, have this issue of racism. Just pure and racism. Racism. Oh boy. I mean, depending on when it was written, it's not unlikely to have old-timey... Oh, it's definitely old-timey racism. Like, I'm not going to read to you the description that he had of her, but it was very upsetting to me. And, you know, as a black person who, you know, it's Black History Month, I decided to be selfish and not read it to you. Because this story is royalty free, and you know, whoever the author is could spit in the grave for all I care. Ads are getting ready to start in 22 seconds, so if you don't want to miss anything, head over to YouTube. That being said, yeah, we are not a fan of... Are you liking the story so far? Weird language aside? Other than that, XD. Yes, never me. I'm glad you all are here to enjoy this little flit of fancy of today. Did you know I was a little nervous about today? I was actually planning on making this, no talking stream, but I knew you couldn't bear it, and neither could the people who made the music, so instead we are just speaking softly. I hope that one day I'll be able to take this format the way I want to, where I can have you guys sit in front of me and we can read like library story time style in VR chat one day. All 18 plus, by the way, because, you know, these streams are 18 plus. Also, I notice that something has not updated, and that bothers me. So do not worry. I shall fix it right now. Let us see. Oh. Are you charging? No. Dearest phone, do you just? Silly phone. Oh, that would do it. There we are. Sorry about that. I have to make sure my tracking works. Oh, speaking of tracking, right? So one of the things that I want to point out to you is that maybe you're a newer VTuber, or maybe you are, I guess, starting out. I would say that it is worth it to you from one VTuber to another, right? You can get a really cheap iPhone 10. Get a really cheap iPhone 10 and use that for your tracking. The tracking is immaculate. Like, it is very good. I, for the first half of my VTuber career, used webcam tracking and the NVIDIA tracking. It is completely different. Just give that a shot and you will, like, it is immediate how good it is. Just how good it is. Can't live without it. But now that we have returned to our story, let's continue. But after it had lived full of its life for an hour, he closed his eyes and fell asleep with Belada brushing the flies from him. He awoke, it was night, and she was gone. But he was aware of his renewed strength, and by then, too, through inoculated by the mosquito poison to suffer further inflammation, he closed his eyes and slept on unbroken stretch until sunup. Later on, Belada had returned, bringing with her half a dozen women who, were unbeautiful as they were not as patiently so as she. She evidenced by her conduct that she considered him her find, her property, and the pride she took in showing him up would have been ludicrous had the situation had been not so desperate. After then would have been to him a terrible journey of miles when he collapsed in front of the house in the shadow of the breadfruit tree. She had shown to be very lively of ideas on the matter, of retraining possession of him. Negruman, who Basset was known to afterward as the doctor, priest, or medicine man of the village, had wanted his head. The others grinned men as stark clothes and appearance as Balada had wanted his body for the roasting oven, and at the time he had not understood their language, and by language may have been oh wow. We're going to skip this weird thing, but Balada had been losing the debate rapidly, and when the accident happened, one of the men, curiously examining Bassett's shotgun, managed to cock it and pull the trigger. The recoil of the butt into the pit of the man's stomach had not been the most sanguinary results, for the charge of shot at a distance of a yard had blown the head of one of the debaters into nothingness. Even Balada had joined others in the fight, ere they had returned to their senses, already reeling from the oncoming fever attack. Bassett had regained possession of the gun, whereupon his teeth chattered with ague and swimming eyes could scarcely see. He held on to his fading consciousness until he could intimidate the bushman with the simple of magics of compass, watch, burning glass, and matches. At the last, with due emphasis and solemn awfulness, he had killed a young pig with his shotgun and promptly fainted. Bassett flexed his arm muscles in quest of what possible strength of might that may reside in such weakness, and dragged himself slowly, totteringly to his feet. He was shockingly emaciated, and yet during the various convalescence of many months of his long sickness, he had never regained, or quite regained, the same degree of strength as this time. He feared another relapse was as such as he already frequently experienced. Without drugs or even quinine, he managed to live so far through a combination of the most pernicious and malignant malarial and black-watered fevers. But could he endure? Was his everlasting query. For, like the genuine scientist he was, he would not be content to die until he had solved the very secret of the sound. Supported by a staff, he staggered the few steps to the house where Death and Nugran resided in gloom. Almost infamously dark and evil as the jungle, in Bassett's opinion. There was usually to be found his favorite crony and gossip, Ingrid, always willing for a yarn or discussion, while he sat in the ashes of death, and so smoke shrewdly curing human heads suspended from the rafters. For, through the months of interval consciousness of his long sickness, Bassett had mastered the psychological sympathies and lingual difficulties of the language of the tribe of Nugrun and Balada in Vigun. The latter was the chief, ruled by Ningun, and who whispered intrigue, had it was the son of Ingrun. Bassett asked the chief a question, and by this time was accustomed to the old man's gruesome occupation, as to even take an interest in the progress of the smoking and curing. With an expert eye, Ingram examined this particular head that he was at work upon. "It'll be 10 days until I can finish," he said. "Never has any man fixed heads like these." Bassett smiled inward at the old fellow's reluctance to talk with him of the Red One. It had always been so. Never by any chance had Ingram or any of the other members of the weird tribe divulged the slightest hint of the physical characteristics of the Red One. Physically, the red one must be to emit the wonderful sound, but though it was called the red one, Bassett could not be sure that the red represented its color. Red enough for the deeds and power of it, from the abstract clues he had gleaned. Not alone Ingram had informed him the red one was more bestial powerful than the neighbor tried gods, even a thirst for red blood of living human sacrifices, but the neighbor gods themselves were sacrificed and tormented before him. He was a god of a dozen allied villages similar to this one, which was central but this one was the central and commanding village of the Federation. By virtue of the red one, many alien villages have been devastated and even wiped out, the prisoners sacrificed to the red one. This was true today, and it extended back into old history carried down by word of mouth through the generation, when he, Ingram, had been a young man. The tribes beyond the grassland had made a war raid. In the counter raid, Ingram and his fighting folks had made many prisoners. Of the children alone, 50 had been bled, while the red one and many, many more men and women. The Thunderer was another one of Ingram's names for the mysterious deity. Also at times he was called the Loud Shouter, the God-voiced, the Bird-throated, the one whose throat sweet as the honey-bird, the Sun-singer, and the Star-born. Why the Star-born? In vain, Bassett interrogated Ingram. According to the doctor, the red one had always been, and just when he was present, for every signing and thundering of his will over men. But Ingram's father had wrapped the decaying grass matting and hanging even over their heads among the smoky rafters of the house, and held otherwise. The departed wise one had believed that the red one had come out of the starry night. Else, why? His argument had run, and had the old and forgotten ones passed his name down as the Star-born? Bassett could not recognize something cognizant in such an argument, but Ingram had confirmed the long years of his long life, wherein he had gazed upon many starry nights, and yet had never found a star on a grassland or in a jungle depths, and he had looked for them. True, he had beholden some shooting stars, but likewise he had beheld the phosphorescence of fungal growths and rotten meat and fireflies on dark nights, and the flames of wood flies and candle nuts, and yet were flame and blaze and glow when they had flame and blazed and glowed? Answer: memories. Memories only, of things that had ceased to be, like memories of matings accomplished, of feasts forgotten, of desires that was the ghost of desires, flaring, flaming, burning, and yet unrealized in achievement of easement and satisfaction. I need a sip of water. Where was the appetite of yesterday? The roasted flesh of the wild pig and the hunter's arrow failed to slay the maid unwed, dead ear, the young man who knew her. The memory was not a star, was Newgren's contention. How could a mere memory be a star? Further after along his long life, he observed the starry night unaltered. Never had he noted the absence of a single star from its accustomed place. Besides, the stars were fire, and the red one was not fire, which last involuntary betrayal had told Bassett nothing. "Will the red one speak tomorrow?" he queried. Ingrid shook his shoulders as to who would say. "And the day after? And the day after that?" Bassett persisted. "I would like to have the curing of your head." Newgren changed the subject. "It is different from any other head. No doctor has a head like it. Besides, I would cure it well. It would take many months. The moons would come and the moons would go, and the smoke would be very slow. And I should myself gather the materials for curing smoke. The skin would not wrinkle, and it would be just as smooth as your skin now." He stood up, and from the dim rafters, grimmed with the smoking of countless heads, where the day was no more than a gloom, and took down a matting-wrapped parcel and began to open it. "It is a head like yours, but it is poorly cured." Bassett had pricked up his ears at the suggestion that there was another white man's head, for he had long since come to accept that these people in the centermost great island had never had relations with white people. He had certainly found them without the universal Belchtimer English of the West-South Pacific, nor had they knowledge of tobacco or gunpowder. Their precious knives made from lengths of hoop iron, and their few and even more precious tomahawks from cheap trade hatchets. He had surmised they had been captured in war from the people of the jungle beyond the grassland, and that they in turn had simply gained them from the saltwater men who fringed on coral beaches of the shore and had contact with occasional white people. "The folk in the beyond do not know how to cure heads," old Newgren explained, as he drew forth one of the filthy matting and placed it in Bassett's hand in an indubitable white man's head. Ancient as it was, beyond question, white, as the blonde hair attested. He could have sworn it once belonged to an Englishman, and to an Englishman long before the token of heavy gold circles still threaded in the withered earlobes. "Now your head," the doctor began, his favorite topic. "I'll tell you what," Bassett interrupted, struck by a new idea. "When I die, I'll let you have my head to cure it, if you first take me to look upon the red one." "I'll have your head anyway when you're dead." Newgren rejected the proposition, and he added, with the brutal frankness, "Besides, you'll have not long to live. You're almost a dead man now. You'll grow less strong. In not many months I shall have you here turning and curing in the smoke. It is pleasant, though, through the afternoons to turn the head of one you have known as well as I know you. I shall talk to you and tell you many secrets you want to know, which will not matter, for you will be dead." "Nukroon," Bassett threatened in sudden anger, "you know that the shotgun is mine. I can kill you at any time, and then you will not get my head. Just the same, Vigran or someone of my other folk will have it. And just the same, it will end. Just the same, will end in the smoke in the house. The quicker you slay me with your gun, the quicker your head will turn into the smoke." And Bassett knew that he was beaten in the discussion. What was the red one? Bassett asked himself 1,000 questions in the succeeding week while he seemed to grow stronger. What was the source of the wonderful sound? What was the sun singer, the star-born one, this mysterious deity as bestial conducted as the black and kinky as the black people who existed on this island worshipped it. I don't know, guys. I think I hate this writer. But we still persist. Yeah, I don't know what is this story. I'm reading it off of creepypasta.net. I think we should skip ahead, so this way we can go back. Let's see. Yeah, no, this is a little, I don't know, this is a little too Heart of Darkness for me. This is a little too Heart of Darkness for me, guys. Yes. If you want to read it, it is The Red One by Jack London. But, yeah, I'm not. I do not think I will continue this one. If you wish to read it, please keep in mind that obviously the language is very antiquated, I guess. The language is very antiquated. Yeah, it was published in when? 19... Oh, yeah, 19... Yeah. That'll do it, yeah. The way that we're describing the native people that were on the island was a little crazy. And very triggering to me. So, yeah, no. Sometimes, even as a librarian who is, you know, very well versed in books of many kinds, sometimes you have to make the decision to say, fuck that. I'm not reading that shit. Fuck you. And Jack London, if you're listening from beyond the grave, I hope you spin... I hope you spin eternally. And I hope it hurts. I hope it hurts that you had a beautiful, successful, and wonderful black woman read your story. I hope it fucking hurts. Yeah, I'm so sorry, guys. That one definitely was worth a pre-read. I thought we were getting H.P. Lovecraft, where you could generally ignore his maligned uttering, not Heart of Darkness. Please forgive your hasty librarian. Next time, we'll read something lighter. What a dreadful tale. And not even dreadful in the fun way. Dreadful in the racism way. Ugh. But unfortunately, that was old books. Which is why this month is so important. This month is so very, very important. I hope for 100 years still that we are able to come together and celebrate this month together. Our Black History Month. So let's find another story that doesn't suck. Well, I mean, the cosmic horror portions of the story was great, but everything else, terrible. Never read, no. Patooey. These look really, really long. We are not reading Reanimator. I think then what we shall do, though, is perhaps, and I hate to end on a sour note, but it is rather late, but I hope you all enjoyed today's stream regardless of me reading such a dreadful tale. Let's go ahead and find someone to share our love with. And find someone to raid, so that I may scream into the void of existential horror that was whatever the hell that was. Okay. Let's see who we've got here. That is a lot of things. We need to adjust the timing on that one. I wish there was more black ASMRists, honestly. Hopefully I can find some more so I can follow some more. That would be good. This is something that I want. Alright. Let's go ahead and go and bother Von Bats, my fellow vampire. And it looks like they are playing Split Fiction. Von Bites, excuse me. I call it Von Bats, but Von Bites is playing Split Fiction. So, let's go ahead and give them some love. And despite everything, I had a wonderful stream with you. Despite that vile story. Be good to one another. Drink lots of water, and be good to yourselves. Good night, everyone.